What happens when someone who has shaped modern psychology claims to have seen beyond death? And why would he keep that experience hidden, not for months, but for nearly a lifetime? Carl Gustav Jung, the father of analytical psychology, devoted his life to exploring the unconscious mind, archetypes, and the nature of the soul. But in 1944, during a near-death experience, he encountered something that shook even his vast understanding of human existence. He documented it, not in a published paper, but in a private letter, one that remained unknown to the public for almost 80 years. Why did Jung never speak of it openly? What did he see that left him permanently changed? The answers lie in a letter meant not for fame or theory, but for one person, a colleague whose name was never revealed. And now, after decades of silence, the letter has resurfaced. This is what Jung saw. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the Mental Dose channel and join the Telegram community to stay updated on new videos about personal and spiritual growth. Now let's start. In the spring of 1944, Jung was hospitalized following a heart attack. During his critical state, his heart stopped. Clinically, he was gone for several minutes, but according to Jung, those minutes were not empty. They were filled with a kind of clarity he had never known before. He later wrote that consciousness didn't vanish, it expanded. He saw the earth from above, suspended in space, not as a familiar home, but as a beautiful, distant place, glowing like a blue jewel. In this disembodied state, he described being drawn into a vast, timeless expanse, a space he compared to a temple not built of stone or words, but of light itself. In that temple, he said, everything he had believed to be consciousness was stripped away. What remained was something deeper, something real, not a projection, not a metaphor, but the essence of self beyond time and memory. Jung met no angels, no figures from scripture, but he did encounter a presence, a being that communicated not through language but through understanding. It poured clarity into him, not information. And in that moment, Jung grasped something that psychology had never dared to address directly, that the soul is real, and death is not an end, but a transition. The letter describes how, just before being pulled back to life, Jung was shown what he believed to be a vision, not of his own life, but of humanity's future. At first, it made little sense, but later, as he scribbled notes from his hospital bed, the pieces formed a troubling pattern. He foresaw a time when the boundary between life and death would become thinner, not metaphorically, but literally. A time when people would begin to sense more, perceive more, and with it would come not only enlightenment, but chaos. He called it the space between worlds, a phrase never used in his published writings. In that vision, he saw a world where everything was visible, a world of light without shadow. But Jung added a warning. Where there is no shadow, there is no depth. In this future world, suffering had been erased. Pain, confusion, even death had become transparent. But without them, the soul, he wrote, loses its weight. He wasn't romanticizing pain. He was suggesting that contrast, the dark and the light, is essential to spiritual growth. Without night, there is no dawn. Without suffering, no transformation. This vision was not something he believed the world was ready to hear, and so he remained silent. In that state between lives, Jung was allowed to ask a single question. He chose the one that had driven him his entire life. What is truth? The answer did not come in words, but in a vision. He saw a tree, its roots buried in deep darkness, its crown ablaze with fire. Truth, he realized, is not knowledge. It is growth. It is the willingness to let suffering become understanding, to let the unknown become familiar. It is light earned, not inherited. Jung later wrote that this moment changed the course of his inner life. He returned to his body reluctantly. The hospital room, the doctors, the weight of reality all returned, but he was not the same. He didn't proclaim what had happened. He didn't preach. Instead, he hid it between symbols within myths and among the alchemical texts he studied obsessively in his later years. His public writings remained careful. But this letter was different. It was raw, unfiltered, a message left only for someone who might one day be ready to hear it. Before we go further, I truly hope you're finding this video insightful. If so, don't forget to share it with anyone who might benefit from these ideas. And if you'd like to support our channel and the work we do, you can leave a donation by clicking the thanks button just below this video. Your support means the world to us. Now let's continue. Toward the end of the letter, Jung makes a subtle, unsettling admission. He writes that not everything beyond death was light. There were presences watching. Gatekeepers, perhaps, not malicious but imposing. He was not allowed to pass further, he said, until he had fully become who he was meant to be. He never called them demons. He never used words of fear. But he did describe an intelligence that guards the threshold between life and what lies beyond. And the message was clear. This realm is not for the curious, but for the ready. He ends the letter with a final line. If you are reading this, it means you've already heard the call. This letter was not written for everyone. Jung knew that. It wasn't meant for academics or critics. It was meant for the seeker, for the one who has tasted the edge of something more, in a dream, in a loss, in a moment of silence when the world suddenly feels too thin to hold all that is real. This isn't about belief, it's about experience. And experience, Jung wrote, is the only path to truth. Not theory, not speculation, but transformation. Carl Jung never published this letter. He feared the consequences. The world of the 1940s wasn't ready. Perhaps even now we aren't. He feared the consequences. He knew the world of the 1940s wasn't ready. Perhaps even now we aren't. But the timing of its rediscovery, almost 80 years later, feels less like coincidence and more like invitation. An invitation not to blindly believe, but to explore for ourselves. To sit in silence and ask, who am I beneath the noise, beneath the fears, beneath the masks? And when death comes, not as a terror but as a question, will we recognize it as a door we've always been walking toward? Jung's final message isn't about life after death. It's about life before death, and whether we're truly living it. Because the point, as he wrote, is not to escape death. It is to walk through it and finally remember who we've always been. If these words stirred something in you, don't let it pass in silence. Leave a comment. Share what you felt, what you saw behind your eyes as you listened. You're not alone, and someone else might need to read what you write. And if you want to keep exploring the edges of mind, soul, and meaning, subscribe to Mental Dose. This journey has just begun.